Hey everyone, this is Mike Cook and Positive Connections Radio. I'd like to add a little pre-podcast talk with you and ask you to come to my page, Positive Connections Radio, on Facebook, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcasts, and listen and like it. Add some comments if you can. I'd really appreciate it to see what y'all were thinking, and if I can make any connections with you, that would be great. Now, Laura Murray is on the show today, and she is a positive connection for sure, in more than one way. And my connection with her is related to my earlier podcast with Jason Ritchie, episode 15, and Project Rebound. Now, I was a police officer in the 90s. And here's the connection to my former career as a police officer with Laura. And I didn't realize this. Well, I realized it early on in the podcast when she said she was part of a cartel involved in an operation called Operation Tarpit. Now, Operation Tarpit was multi-state wide, countrywide, I believe. And of course, it had to deal with heroin. So in the 90s, 98, I was working patrol, and another person that was working vice narcotics, the position that I ended up getting, he was a part of this in Carlsbad. And it was a huge case. And so I did talk to her off the air about it. And it's just such a coincidence and a synchronicity for sure that she's come all the way around. So it'd be really great to have this information sent to the person that was in charge of this operation back then, and see where Laura is now. So I hope you enjoy the show. Let me know what you think. Hi, this is Mike Cook, and welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This show is intended to help break the stigma of mental health issues among first responders. I know from personal experience how PTSD, depression, and addiction can take over your life while suffering in silence. I was a police officer for 19 years and spent the last 10 years of my career as an undercover narcotics detective. I didn't reach out because of fear, lack of trust, shame, and stigma. It took me losing it all before I got help. With a new perspective and passion for life, I can now help others find a way out. Working together with peer support, wellness units, and the mental health and recovery field, we can bring about positive change for the ones who protect us all. The guests on this show offer unique and valuable information, support, and experience, and are the voice for those waiting to be heard. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Positive Connections Radio. We got a great guest today. Her name is Laura Murray. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
And I'm not going to explain everything. I'm going to go right to Laura. And Laura, start back from the beginning and sort of show where you were, and then what happened, and then where you're at right now, coming out the other side.
Well, I started taking criminal justice classes in the early 80s. I started going to community college, to Palomar Community College, and with hopes of being a probation officer. And I was a single parent. I had a very young son. I worked part-time, and I went to school, and everything seemed very black and white to me. You know, bad people went to prison, and good people worked and had a good life. And things continued on, and I noticed I had to work more and more since I was a single parent and I believed in the American dream. But somehow, like many in our country, I turned to addiction to deal with stress. Okay. And I was pretty ill-suited to do that. Like most people. I really didn't start getting in trouble, and I just dabbled and dipped a little bit in it. Luckily, I'd like to say my son was shielded, but he wasn't shielded that much. You know, there was never any CPS. I was never arrested. There was never any of that, but I'm sure he saw signs of my addiction.
Right. Was it alcohol and drugs?
Yeah,
combined?
it was alcohol and drugs at that time. Not so much alcohol, just drugs. And, meth came around in the 80s, and that helped me work longer hours,
Of
So
course.
that helped with the overtime. And then I lived in Del Mar. That also was a higher income area.
A little
I
expensive
wanted,
there.
yeah, and I wanted to keep my son in the Del Mar school district. So I worked and worked as hard as I could to keep him in that district and work in Del Mar. Um, but the drugs did start to take a toll, and of course, like many, instead of helping me cope, they actually gave me a lack of coping skills.
Right.
When my son was 19 in the late 90s, I had gotten involved in a cartel, believe it or not. It turned out to be the largest heroin cartel trafficking in the U.S. It was named Operation Tarpit by the DEA, and all around the United States, there was about 237 of us arrested at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I had no idea how big the scope of what I had gotten myself into was. My son was in college, so he, again, was not involved in any of that. The DEA had been watching us for years. It was a very dangerous, like most cartels, a very dangerous line of work that I was in.
Sure.
I received the longest sentence of all the females due to my involvement as what we called a trainer. I would train the runners when they would come up for a 3-month stretch to work and to traffic, and they would leave again. So I went to federal prison. I received 60 months for my part in the cartel, which was the most of all the females. And the other ones were just wives or maybe had one count, and thought I had learned my lesson. But what I didn't learn was coping skills. What I didn't learn was how to deal with the problems that brought me to prison in the first place. So I got out. I got a job right away. I was clean. I thought I was doing everything right. I worked in Northern California. I was in the Operating Engineers Union, but I still drank every once in a while. Not blind drunk, not what I would at the time wouldn't call myself an alcoholic. But I worked very long hours to make up financially for everything that I had lost. And I eventually bought a home up in Northern California in a town called Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of it since the whole entire town has burned down
Right.
a couple years ago. And it was a really nice little house, and it had rental property on it, and I thought I was living the American dream again. Still drinking a little bit, not using any drugs. But after I bought the home, I felt a lot of pressure. And then came the home loan crisis. They started switching my loan from lender to lender. It went from Wells Fargo to Chase Morgan to Fannie Mae. It went to several lenders. Within like a 6-month period, my loan was swapped and changed around between about 5 different lenders. And I knew something was going on. Up in Paradise, you're pretty isolated. It's a very small town in Northern California, and there's very few services. And then one day at my heavy equipment job in Northern California, I had almost 5 years, which was enough to be vested in the company, but was short 3 months. Mm-hmm. They called 10 of us in, mostly older women, and a couple people who were Hispanic. They called us all in and laid all 10 of us off in one day. We lost everything. We lost our benefits. We lost our job. At first, we huddled together. We pulled our resources for new jobs. We tried to pull ourselves up by straps. Some did, some didn't. I took another job at Sierra Nevada Brewing for $4 less an hour driving heavy equipment. In the meantime, the banks started to foreclose on my home because of that $4 an hour cut. I was just barely making the mortgage and had missed 1 or 2 payments and then would pay it off with my credit card, just putting me deeper and deeper into debt. In the meantime, since I was working at a brewery, I started drinking more because they give you beer every payday, free beer, as long as, as well as your paycheck.
Right.
And so I actually had more beer than I had food. So it was a strange kind of hell where you have the best beer that you could drink, but no food. Wow. So, and at the time I was on insulin. I was an insulin diabetic, and they paid for the insulin, but they didn't pay for the needles. And it was very strange trying to get by. And I remember walking around in stores wanting food so bad, and then going to my car and crying because for some reason, I could not shoplift. But I was just so sad that I was hungry and I couldn't get any help, couldn't get food stamps because I had the prior drug conviction. So I went to churches to get food, which is like a loaf of bread and peanut butter. It's not real food.
Sure.
And it's not food that a diabetic should have.
Right.
So they completely, of course, I fell further and further behind. They completely foreclosed on my home. I left the renter in place. The poor renter had no idea what had even happened to her. Mm-hmm. And because I was so irresponsible. And I ended up relapsing. So to make things even worse, now I'm back using heroin. I'm living in my car, and my home is gone. And of course, I have great folks, but they're not going to support me while I'm using, and I can't blame them for that. Mm-hmm. They didn't want me anywhere near them. So, I don't know how people can live in their cars or on the riverbanks, which is where most of the people that got their homes foreclosed on lived, along the Sacramento River. But I know I was very bad at it. And it was the middle of summer in Sacramento, really hot. I'm in my car, and I just decided one day after my phone broke and Sprint said they weren't going to pay, even though I paid insurance, they weren't going to pay for a new phone, that I'd have to pay an additional $200 in addition to paying my insurance. So I just had enough. So I just grabbed a Dollar Tree bag from the back of my vehicle and a Burger King napkin and wrote a demand note and walked into a bank in Northern California.
Wow.
And so I ended up.
What happened, right? So how much thinking did you have to do before you went in the bank? Was it just an automatic thought like, I need to get money and this is a way to do it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't an automatic thought at all. It was something that I needed medical care. I was hungry. To me, I thought that I was going to die doing that. And I thought, well, I wanted my money back from the bank. I knew that they had foreclosed on my home with astonishing swiftness, which turned out later to be an illegal foreclosure. But I just had it. I felt like, of course, as a drug addict, you always feel like a victim, but also the social injustice behind me working my ass off and not, and instead receiving a foreclosure, and instead all this stuff happening to me. I was like, I'm just not going to take it anymore. I'm going to go in and I'm going to get my money back, and the heck with what happens. It couldn't have got much worse for me.
Right. So you walk into the bank. What bank is it?
It was a small credit union up in Oroville, California.
Okay.
So I walked into the bank, and first I parked behind the bank at a Tasty Freeze. I put duct tape on my license plate. I walked in, I had a ski mask, and of course, it's 120 degrees and it's July, but I have the ski mask on my head. I haven't pulled it down yet. And there was a little old lady about to go in the same door as myself, and I told her, stay out here, don't go in this bank. She was a little irritated, but she stayed there. So I went into the bank, and it just felt like I'd been struck deaf. All I could see was the clock ticking, huge lines of people since it was a Friday. And there I was. I had to make that decision between pulling that mask down over my face and going up to that teller. And I just decided to commit. So I pulled the mask down. I went to the teller. She told me, you'll have to take that mask off if you want me to help you.
Oh, boy. And
so I gave her the demand note and was aggressive and told her, you have 60 seconds to put that money in the bag right now. I'm not playing. So she did take me seriously. She put the money in the bag. I said both drawers. Instead, she ran to the teller next to her and took her money too. That was a miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran out of that bank. The lady that I left at the door took pictures of me with her cell phone as I was
as the mask was coming off.
Yeah, so I ran out of the bank, took the duct tape off my license plate, threw the money and the mask on the seat, and in my haste thought I was exiting the Tasty Freeze, and in reality had pulled through the drive-thru.
Wow.
So when I went to reverse the car, because there were retaining walls on both sides and I couldn't get out of that line, there was a car full of a lumbering SUV full of kids behind me.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. So I ordered a root beer float. So
you did.
Yeah. So
you figured it was all over.
Well, I just figured, what the heck? I'm sitting there. The young lady keeps asking me, welcome to Tasty Freeze. Can I take your order? Okay. So I told her, give me a root beer float.
Nice.
So, yeah. So I finally, I know the response time is 3 to 5 minutes for, any kind of robbery or anything from that police department. So I was just sweating bullets, really. Waiting in the line, I pulled up, and just as I just grabbed any denomination out of the bag to pay the girl at the window, I saw her look really quick towards the street, and there went about 5 marked police cars and 1 Crown Vic with the cherry on top, which is the siren, flying right past me. And I was like, well, that's pretty convenient. So I got my root beer float and pulled right out the other way and got on the freeway.
Wow. You got out of the area.
Yeah. But what I did do, in Paradise, there's only 1 road up and 1 road down, and I went right up that road.
Mm-hmm.
And in my haste of counting all the money, somebody called me in as a drunk driver, which I was not.
Right.
I was sober as a church mouse when that happened. But
you were drinking a root beer float.
Yeah, right. And trying to count money that I'd never seen before in my life. So they had the path in my direction. So I went on up the hill and told my friend, hey, I have that $200 I borrowed from you.
Seriously.
So I went and actually I don't know what I was thinking, but I paid him back the money, and then I went and paid my Sprint bill. Remember, I told you they wanted the $200 for the phone.
Right.
So I went and paid the Sprint bill, and when I came up the hill, there was 2 plainclothes detectives hiding behind my car because we had taken my friend's car,
mm-hmm.
and I was arrested.
So you were somebody else at the time?
I went to his house, and we had taken his car because I thought, well, they might be looking for mine.
I got it.
It was an understatement.
Sure.
So the detectives, came rushing out when I got out of his car and kept asking, who's the man behind this robbery? We know
mm-hmm.
you didn't do it by yourself. And I said, I absolutely did do it by myself, and they yelled at me, girls don't rob banks.
They did.
So I said, well, I hadn't even thought about it. This one did.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they had thought the whole time that there was a man that had put me up to it, and witness had even said they saw a man in my car, which I have high back seats. Witnesses are, notoriously unreliable.
Of course.
So yeah, I said, no, I did it by myself. And they took me into custody. The problem was I had such a severe diabetic infection, they couldn't keep me.
Okay.
So they took me to the hospital, and when I was at the hospital, I signed out AMA.
They didn't even watch you?
No, they let me go. They let me go. I kept calling the police department asking for my car, and when I walked out of the door, there was the police lieutenant, and he said, do you want to ride to your car? And I said, the front seat or the back seat? And he said, the front seat.
This is just after they caught you robbing a bank and they brought you to the hospital, and then you signed out AMA, and they gave you a ride.
Right. The police lieutenant of that town picked me up and gave me a ride
All right.
to my vehicle. He said, we don't have the keys anymore. I said, that's okay. I have a spare. He said, they're just finishing going over your car. By the way, we got your heroin. I said, that's fine. I don't care. Just let me have my car.
Mm-hmm.
And he let me have the car. And I drove off. And 2 hours later, I robbed another bank. So
What was the reasoning for them letting you go? They didn't believe that you robbed the bank, or you were...
Oh, no, they knew. They had footage of me robbing the bank. They let me go because it's a small town. And unfortunately, you know, if you're on the right side of that small town, he said, well, you got a couple days till your warrant drops, so enjoy yourself. The problem was enjoying myself was not an option. I had a severe infection that was so painful. I had no food. I had $5 for gas. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I got away. But in reality, it was back to the same hell that I was trying to get out of to begin with.
And then probably you're strung out by then because you're doing heroin.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have any drugs.
I'm completely strung out. I'm in horrible pain because of the infection on both legs. It was a nightmare for me. I didn't know how to get myself out of it. Okay. I didn't know where to even begin to get help because I tried to go to the hospital for the infections, but because I had no health insurance, they wouldn't take me at the hospital. So, I mean, they agreed that I needed treatment. I had a fever of about 102, 103, but I couldn't get the treatment. I couldn't get food. This was my only coping mechanism. I had gotten in so deep.
It sure sounds like it. So off with no other choice to the next bank.
Right. So off to the next bank I went. And this time, I walked in, left with the money very quietly. Some people didn't even know I'd robbed the bank. But this time I thought, I'm not staying in town. That was an obvious mistake. So I got on the freeway and I headed down to Oakland, California, where you can pretty much do anything and get lost in Oakland, of course. I had some friends down there. So I stayed there in Oakland for a while. And then I went up to, I believe, Fairfield, I want to say. And I stayed at a Motel 6. Now, mind you, I had no ID. The police had taken that. They'd taken my driver's license, my ID, but I was still driving that car.
Yeah. How much money did you get away with the second time?
The second time, the first time was about $4,000 to $6,000. The second time, well, they took the $4,000 to $6,000 when they arrested me.
Oh, of course.
So then I had to start over again. So the second time I started over, and I think it was more like $6,000 to $7,000. It went up somewhat.
All right.
So then I went to Fairfield. But the funny thing was I was in the outlet stores. I mean, I was still buying things on sale, even though I had like $8,000 in cash.
Right.
I was so used to budgeting my money and buying stuff on sale and taking less than that I couldn't spend that money if I wanted to. That was the worst part.
Right. How did you feel at the time? How did you feel about taking the money and what you were doing? Because obviously you're strung out still. So did you have to go get some more drugs or?
Yeah, and that's what I did down in Oakland.
Okay.
You know, so, yeah, so I was completely strung out. But the thing was I was just in so much pain. I had gone to one hospital and they wanted to amputate my right leg below the knee because it was such a severe infection. Wow. And I was I just remember being in so much pain and thinking, they've got to kill me. You know, I've got to get killed sooner or later. And sure enough, my old federal probation officer, who had watched me after the cartel do very well, had been trying to contact me. And she left a message saying, they've listed you as armed and dangerous and as escaped from Oroville. She said, they're trying to kill you. Please turn yourself in. And I thought, good. You know, I didn't call her back. I've since then spoke to her, and she nearly cried when she saw me because she told me, Laura, they were trying to kill you. And yeah, that was an interesting reunion. But
I bet.
Yeah, so I was just on the run, staying at this hotel, was freaked out about every noise, every move. everything, thinking they were going to come get me at any minute. And I had someone who I'd like to call a friend, but he wasn't really a friend. And he said, well, if you're going to keep robbing banks, you need to come pick up a gun. Until that, I'd never used a gun in the commission of the robberies.
Right.
So I was on my way to his house, and I thought, let me rob one more bank before I get there, because it had become like a habit to me.
Well, yeah, after the first two, it's probably the third ones are probably a lot easier to walk in the front door.
Yeah, you think, okay, and especially after they let me go, for some reason I was not weighing out the consequences of what was happening. I believe it was because I was just had that heroin haze, or I wanted to get killed.
Yeah. So
I went to the third bank, and everything went wrong at that third bank. When I went to get out of the vehicle, I dropped my keys, fell out of my pocket, and were on the seat. And because I had the money from another bank in the car, I power locked all the doors.
Oh boy. And
didn't realize my keys had fallen out. So I walked into the bank, and usually I want the manager to be in the back of the bank. That's the good place for the manager's desk. But this manager's desk was at the front of the bank. And then the windows, they had bulletproof glass over the tellers, which I'd never seen before.
Right.
And all those signs should have said, get out of that bank right now. Don't do it. But I just felt bulletproof, because of the drugs, because I'd gotten away with it, because I didn't really care. And I walked in and robbed that third bank. And she read my note and looked at me and looked at the glass. I said, I'll come right over that glass and get you. By then, I'd become very bold.
Mm-hmm.
So she went ahead and gave me the money, but with her fingernails, she tore the bottom of my plastic bag, and I didn't see it. So when I ran out of the bank, not only was my vehicle locked, but I was trailing 20s behind me.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, so there was a little old lady there who kept saying, you're losing your money. Do you want me to call a tow truck? And I said, do you have a tire iron? She said, no. I said, then forget it. And I kept seeing her keys going back and forth in her ignition with that little ding, ding, ding. Mm-hmm. And I thought I'd just shoving her out of the way and grabbing her car, but she looked so much like a friend of my mom's. There was no way I could ever treat, an elderly person like that. I still had these morals that I was given as a child that didn't serve me as a criminal, and right. Really thank God I had those. So I ran to a FedEx truck. I grabbed the toolbox. I thought for sure there's going to be a tire iron. The guy was busy making a delivery, and all it was one of those black sand reflective triangles. Mm. So I, tried to break the window. It was a newer car with pressurized glass. Couldn't break it. And by then the cops had descended on me. And they told me, you won't escape like you did in Oroville. And they had the dogs on me. They had the tasers on me. They had everything on me. I complied. I thought, I didn't escape in Oroville. What's he talking about? The police lieutenant let me go. Right. But again, the police lieutenant was covering his own, and had me listed as armed and dangerous and an escapee and everything else.
Yeah, it sounds like a big mistake letting you go the first time.
Right. But it all comes down to my mistake, so
that's, yeah.
So yeah, he let me go the first time. And sometimes I sat there in the cooler thinking, if he hadn't let me go, I probably wouldn't have got this time. But in reality, I can't blame anyone but myself,
That's a good outlook, especially going through what you did and what you did. So you get arrested for the third one, and then what happened then?
So that was down in Davis.
Okay.
And in near the UC Davis, in a town in the county of Yolo. Okay. So I was put into a county jail where there was a lot of gangs in there, and they kept asking me, what set are you from? Where are you from? First of all, they had me in segregation, I think, for probably 65 days. Because I was coming down off of a lot of drugs, Klonopin, Vicodin, morphine, heroin. I was taking all the prescription drugs for the pain and the infection. Mm-hmm. But they took me off it right away. They just stopped everything. And it made me so violent. I believe it was the Clonopin. It made me so violent that I attacked any cop that came near me. Any CO that came near me, I fought.
What about your infection at that time? Was it still
they
worse?
Actually had medicine that was flown in, or not flown in, but delivered from UC Davis. It turned out it was MRSA. So I had strep. I had, what else? I had a myriad of different infections. So they actually got medication. Of all the jails to land into, I landed into one right next to UC Davis, and they were able to treat it.
Okay, good.
They were able to keep me and treat it and debride it, and it was extremely painful. And in the meantime, they had taken me off everything. So, because I'm not normally a violent person like that, so they had to actually put me back on it. They realized after many fights on either side that they had to wean me off it. You can't just pull somebody off those kind of meds like that.
Right.
So I stayed in segregated housing which is nothing. You have nothing. Like, I had maybe one letter and it was held against the glass. I got a shower maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, but at the very most twice a week, and they would be held against the glass. So I had no contact, no nothing. And all the psychs were asking is, do you hear voices? Do you want to kill yourself? Do you want to kill others? Do you, there was no counseling involved.
Right.
So.
And you had to you got a public defender, I guess, for your case?
I had a public defender for my case. And of course, like most public defenders, she was very overburdened and had a huge caseload, and wanted me to plead to 18 years. I wasn't going to plead to that. I did have some knowledge of the legal system, a very bare bones knowledge, and I knew not to plead to that.
Right.
Then they came back a week later and charged me for the drugs that were in the car. I don't know how they could have done that, but there was legal precedent set for them to do that. So we went back and forth. I stayed in that jail for nearly a year fighting that case. It was even in the newspaper articles, bank robber does her own legal wranglings. Well, of course I am. I'm fighting. I'm sober now. I'm fighting for my life. I realized, that I was in a lot of trouble,
Right. So what happened? Well, you get to court and they sentenced you. And did you actually, fall on the sword and plead guilty and admit?
No, I actually fought it. What little legal resources we have, you're not allowed to go to a law library, but you are allowed to ask for precedent and this and that. And it was then that I realized that while on a spree, since I was caught in the last county first, that whatever they sentenced me to would be what Butte County would sentence me to. So if I took 5 years for bank robbery, which it's a 2, 3, 5 spread, if I took 5 years for bank robbery, that means Butte County can add on 5 years also. But if I only take a year for bank robbery, that means Butte County cannot charge me for more than a year.
Okay.
So realizing this, I told them, you can give me the maximum for the drugs. I'll take it. I said, and give me a year for the bank robbery down here. And they did. After they got tired of arguing with me after 11 months, and that was the plea. So I ended up with 6 years at 85 with a strike from Yolo. I was transported to Chowchilla at the height of the overcrowding. Was there maybe 3 months, pulled off the yard and taken up to Butte County for sentencing. So I was in Butte County for, I think, 10 months doing the same thing, fighting back and forth. When the judge went to sentence me, he said, I'll sentence you to the maximum. And the attorney said, I'm afraid you can't. There's already been a sentence. There's already been a precedent set. And he threw up his hands and said, what am I even here for? So I got a year for that bank robbery. They dropped the second one because the police lieutenant gave me a ride to my car, and they would have had to drag his name through the mud again.
Right.
And he was a nice, good old boy. He was a nice guy, and they didn't want to do that.
Right.
So they told me, you just better be careful when you come back up to Butte County, because there's a lot of sheriffs up here that aren't happy that you embarrassed that police lieutenant.
Have you been back there yet?
Yes,
Okay.
I have.
Okay.
I have.
All right.
My folks live there, so of course, I go back there. But so I ended up with 8 at 85%. I consider myself extremely lucky for that. While I was incarcerated, I was also given a settlement for the illegal foreclosure of my home.
Really?
Which, just about made me cry because of everything that I've been through. It kind of validated that it was illegal. It validated that I wasn't losing my mind, at least not in the beginning, that this was happening. And it wasn't because I was a bad person or a stupid person or a lazy person. It was because, it was illegal, and they didn't go to prison and they didn't go to jail for that. But like everything else, I just have to be accountable for my actions and what I do, so I can't dwell on that. I could have gone back and, because the settlement had no ties to where you couldn't come after them for more money, I could have gone back. But that whole thing made me so sick that I never want anything to do with it again. I don't want to sue anybody. I don't want that. I just want to know that, yes, that was illegal. No, you weren't stupid or lazy or dumb. It happened, and
you had bad actions. You're not a bad person, but, everything combined together, drugs, loss of everything, you made some really horrible choices and you're owning up to it.
Right. So also, while I was in, I was in state prison. They could have sent me to federal prison, but the federal prosecutor said, we're overcrowded too. This was the time, like I said, when everyone was overcrowded. He said, if you can just charge her for robbery, do it and take her, because we can't afford it. So I didn't go back to federal prison. I went to state prison, and I went to a level 4 state prison in Chowchilla.
Okay.
And in addition to receiving the settlement, which was eye-opening, I also looked around and saw who I was locked up with. People that were lacking social equity, people that were lacking education, people that never, ever had the chances that I had. And I started to realize what incarceration in the U.S. means and what groups of people are being disenfranchised. And it really brought me out of my own, pity party, and made me start to be proactive and start to tutor other girls and work as a teaching assistant in there.
What about mental illness? You see a lot of that in prison?
There was a lot of mental illness in there. And yes, there are psychiatrists in there, but not everybody needs a psychiatrist. Not everybody needs psych meds. There were people doing the Thorazine shuffle in there that were shuffling around, and those people were victimized. They were attacked. People wanted to make names for themselves on the yard. So they would attack the EOPs, which is the extended outpatient program that they have for psych patients. And they were severely attacked. They were taken advantage of. They were talked down to by the correctional officers. It was really tragic.
Sounds like it gets to you right now, just thinking about it.
Yeah, well, this is what motivates me today. So I was finally given an opportunity to go to a program at the end of my time, which had never been done before. Most of the opportunities go to the half-timers, to the 35%ers, to the nons, they call them, non-violent, non-sexual, no risk, low risk. But they started creating a program for people on a case-by-case basis. You couldn't be an arsonist or a sex offender, but you would be eligible for this program. And for the women, it was called CCTRP, which is Custody to Community Treatment and Reentry Program. Okay. And as I said, it's a case-by-case basis. By then, I'm a second striker, doing 85% of my time with a violent chrono. Even though I didn't use a gun, robbery by nature is violent through threat or intimidation.
Okay.
So I went to this program, and for about 2 weeks at this program, I asked to go back every single day. It's built on a behavioral modification model. And when I got there, when I was in prison, first of all, my name was changed in Yolo County. Laura was never my name again. It was always bank robber or banks.
Really?
And it was affectionate. It was affectionately my birthday party, my birthday cards all said happy birthday bank robber, bank robbers having a party, all this stuff. But I felt like I had made it a good name. I tutored people to try and help them get their GEDs so they could show their daughters, so they could show their kids that they could do it. I went after people that ripped off people that had mental illness and whatnot. I had a certain clout in there. My pajamas were ironed, my hair was brushed, my hair was braided, my laundry was folded into nice little cubes. I had certain benefits, what they would call a juice card.
Okay.
However, I didn't get it from threat and intimidation. I did it because I stood up for people that didn't have anybody else to stand up for them.
You became an advocate in prison.
Exactly. It made me really mad, and it probably went back to my home being foreclosed on, but I didn't like people who took advantage of other people. And if you were one of those people, you didn't get any of the services which I could get, which was your cigarettes, your shelves for your locker, your extra blanket. I controlled a lot of that. Unfortunately, I still had a criminal thinking mindset at the time. So although I didn't use drugs again in prison, I did traffic in contraband, in all honesty.
There's a lot of that going on too, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's how you survive in there. That's how you survive. It's more of a cumulative disadvantage and constrained choice type of thing, where these are your options and this is normalized in there. So, and there is a lot of social learning, and that's what they're talking about when they say you can go in a straight person and come out a convict.
Right.
So,
a whole school in there to live a different way, being incarcerated.
Right. And if you're marginalized or disenfranchised, this is how you work with it in this society. So I got out. I kept going to the parole agent every day and saying, send me back. I don't want to be in this punk place and this and that. You're writing people up for an extra cup of coffee. I didn't get it. That, it's all about compliance. And if you break one rule, then you can break any rule. So, but there were girls there that knew me from inside, and they said, I still need help with my GED or my high set. What do you say about tutoring me? And I was like, all right, cool. You seem like you want to do it. Let's do this. They would take extra time at night, we would study together. And one time the education coordinator had forgotten something in her office, and she came back and caught us studying in the kitchen with a flashlight. It was after hours. That's a violation. So she told us both, return to your quarters. I'll talk to you in the morning. And I'm like, oh, great. Here it goes. And the girl that I was tutoring is like, please don't write her up. It's not her fault. She was just helping me. And the education coordinator said, we have tutors, and she's like, I don't learn anything from those tutors, which I'm like, oh, great. You're making it worse.
Right.
So we went in the morning. She went in and she came back and she gave me the thumbs up. She's like, I didn't get a write up. I'm like, great. She's probably going to write me up. So I went in, and I didn't know this lady from a can of paint. And she said, give me the names of the people you've been tutoring. And I'm like, the typical convict attitude. I'm like, I'm not telling you nothing.
Right.
And she's like, you're not in trouble. I just want to know, because certain test scores are going up, and I want to know if there's a correlation. And I was like, all right then. So I gave her the names, of the 4 girls I had been tutoring. And she's like, that's what I thought. And she didn't say anything else, but she asked me something that no one had asked me in years. And she said, what's your deal? what do you want to do anyway? What's the deal with you, Murray? And no one had ever asked me that in prison, because a lot of resources, understandably, are spent on the youngsters in prison. You know, the ones that have come from really bad homes and that have gang ties and that have gone through domestic violence and all this. I kind of got passed over because I was under the radar. I was older, and oh, that's just bank robber. Leave her alone. You know, she's all right. She'll be okay. So no one ever asked me that. So I was struck kind of dumb by that. And I told her, you know what? I always wanted to finish my undergrad degree. And I really, more than anything else, wanted to go to San Diego State. And she's like, well, what if I tell you that I know someone at San Diego State? I'm like, yeah, right, whatever. And so she goes, all right, get out of my office. You're not getting a write-up. So I leave her office, and she called me in about a week later, and she said, you know, there's a program at San Diego State. And I spoke to the program director, and you have an appointment to talk to him on the phone. And I was like, really? I go, oh, you're full of it. She's like, no. So, yeah, I ended up talking to the executive director, Alan Mobley, or Dr. Mobley. And he said, you know, I looked at your transcripts, and you probably have about 19 more units before you can transfer. You've got to take that all in one semester. Do you think you can do it?
Wow.
And I was like, he said, you could go to Mesa College. They'll give you a pass. You'll have to go with your ankle monitor on. Mm-hmm. You won't be able to carry cash or a cell phone or have computer access. But do you think you can do it?
And I said, time? Are you still at CCTRP or?
Yeah. And so I'm still in custody.
Okay.
So we have an in-house parole agent. We have ankle monitors on. We're tracked everywhere we go. It's very strict, very strict. So, yeah, I told them, yeah, I think I can do it, you know, which gave me like this new hope that I could, you know, that I could do it. And let me go to school sober. Let me see how this works out. Because I told myself, you know, the parole agent told me, for once, give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance and just try life sober. So I thought, all right, we'll see how far I can get. So I passed that semester, took 19 units. Got about a 3.16. They were pretty tough classes, like business statistics and astronomy lab. They were some tough courses, the ones that I'd put off till the very end.
Sure.
And I took that, and Dr. Mobley told me to apply to not just San Diego State, but 4 CSUs. So while most people have a college coach behind them, I had a CO behind me when I applied. Mm-hmm. I applied to San Diego State, Cal State Fullerton, Cal State San Bernardino, and Chico State, since that's where my folks all graduated from. So I got rejected from every single one of them. You know, my GPA was atrocious. Cumulative was atrocious. It was like a 2.68, this and that. I told Professor Mobley, well, you know, I tried. It's only the best school in California. I understand why I can't get in. Everybody applies for SDSU. And he's like, no, what you will do is you will write an appeal, and I'll take that appeal to admissions for you. So without much hope, I just wrote like a paragraph saying, you know, not only if you allow me to San Diego State, not only will you enrich the diversity of your students, but you will also enrich my life and allow me to pay back the harm that I've caused in the past.
Wow.
And I sent it off. So the day before I paroled, I got accepted to Chico State.
The day before.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
I got accepted to Chico State. So I went up with my mother, who was an alumni from 1950s, and I dragged her to the orientation with me. And I accepted my financial aid, and I got my classes, and I got back to San Diego, and I was going to the gym on my little 150 moped by then. By this time, I'm living in a parolee program called National Crossroads up on 49th and Imperial.
Okay.
So I come back, and San Diego State's web portal keeps saying, update your address. And I'm like, gosh, why are these people bothering me? I already didn't get in. What the heck? I was happy, you know, I was okay going to Chico State because at least I would finish my degree. Mm-hmm. And I was in the locker room at Planet Fitness, and it was about 10:30 at night. And I thought, let me just clear this to get this email out of my box. And I went to put in my new information, and where it had said denied, it said accepted.
Wow.
And that was it. That changed my entire life. So
Amazing. So you got accepted to San Diego State.
I got accepted to San Diego State. So I called my folks, and I think it was kind of a relief to them that I wasn't coming back up to Butte County. They knew it would be a hard road to toe for me up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I called my folks, and I told them, and then I called my parole agent, and I told them, you don't have to transfer my parole because I'm staying. And I was just...
That was an emotional moment for you.
Yeah, it's still emotional for me years later.
Of course.
So I went in
to change your life.
Yeah, I went in as a sociology major because the entrance GPA was lower. And I told Professor Mobley I'd still like to do criminal justice, but I was told by a U.S. attorney a long time ago that I would never, ever have a career in the field again. He said, and you believed her? And I said, yes, I did. Why wouldn't I? She's a U.S. attorney, and she's a U.S. prosecutor. And He said, I'm here to tell you it's not true. There are many things you could do with your insight in criminal justice today. But I loved sociology so much after that first semester that I decided to just declare a double major in criminal justice and sociology. So I took 15 units. Professor Mobley said, that's probably not advisable, where you're coming from and just out, you really should probably just take 12. And I said, once again, I got this. I got this. So I took my, the exploration classes, which are your general electives, and I took some criminal justice, and I took some sociology classes, and I took 15 units, law and society, many different subjects, and I got a 4.0 across the board that first semester.
Nice.
So because I was really grateful, and I really just wanted to prove to everybody that I could do it. And most of all, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, that sober, I could really get it. I could do it. I could give myself a chance, and I was able to do it. It was like a hot knife through butter for me. All of a sudden school was easy compared to everything I've been through and the horrors that I saw in state prison. School was a piece of cake.
And you're sober.
And I'm sober, and I'm just, I'm attending meetings, NA meetings and this and that, but, I'm also super busy. I'm at school 18 hours a day. My whole life is school, so I went to every professor's office hours. I had a huge amount of support, from the professors at San Diego State. They were understanding. They said, we wish all students would sit in the front row and participate like you do.
That's great.
It was a really good experience for me. And the next semester 4.0, I ended up taking 21 units a semester, still 4.0.
Amazing.
So then I decided, probably about 2/3 the way through, just before it was time to apply, that I would go to grad school. And I thought, this is amazing. I can't believe I would ever go to grad school. So, and I expected the same results. I'm going to apply to all these grad schools, and I'm going to get rejected from every single one.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing was, I applied to all these grad schools, UC Irvine, San Diego State, Cal State, San Bernardino. And this time I was accepted to every single one. So, but I never forget, I always reach back and help the ones that come from behind me, that parole out of prison. Hey, this program is available to you. This life is available to you. You don't have to go back to what you were doing. You don't have to just let life happen to you. You can live life. You can make it happen yourself.
Exactly. And that's CCTRP?
That was CCTRP had actually given me that start. Right. They gave me that foothold. If I'd have just paroled to the streets from prison, I would have just floundered around, maybe drove heavy equipment again, which for a woman my age is getting worse and worse. Sure. It's very demanding work. So, and who would have thought that I could go back to college at such a late age with such a traumatic life event and be so happy and do so much, and make something of myself.
Exactly. So what are you doing right now?
So right now, I just completed my first semester of the criminal justice grad program here at San Diego State. I present research on parole and reentry at the Western Society of Criminology, the American Society of Criminology, and next month for the first time at the Pacific Sociological Association. I'm the member of 5 student organizations. I'm the president of one, which of course is Project Rebound Student Alliance. Mm-hmm. I'm also in the Criminal Justice Honor Society, the Sociological Honor Society, the Criminal Justice Student Association, and the National Honor Society. In addition to being in the student organizations, I'm also, for some reason, a teaching assistant and a grad assistant in great demand. So it's amazing the response I get from the professors. So there is a really special professor, Professor Sim, and I am his mascot, his follower, and his teaching assistant for Sociology 102, Sociology 403, Sociology 412, and Sociology 433, where he explains the problems of social inequity, social injustice, and lack of equity for some disenfranchised groups. He is my hero in sociology. In addition to that, I teach a session of Sociology 101 under Professor Che, who is like a rock star in the sociology department. You listen to his lectures and you lose all space and time when you're listening to them. Nice. I'm also a grad assistant in the criminal justice department in law and society and crime and behavior. Most oftentimes the professors have me tell my story, but I usually wait till the end of class because I want the students to see me as, a student first, an outstanding student first, and then I tell them about my history.
You are truly remarkable. And even bringing that up also, now looking back at from the very beginning, let's say even from, Operation Tarpit to now, was there anybody that really made a difference in your life through your struggles and through your crimes and addictions? Anybody that you could look back on and say, I'm glad that person was there, and I would like to give him credit?
There is somebody. He's an E7, a sergeant with Special Forces, medic, Green Beret, who's been my hero my entire life. And that's, at least from 17 on, and that's my son. Awesome. Who's never seen me as anything else but his funny, loving, good-humored mom. He said, when people talk about you as a bank robber, as a drug trafficker, as a homeless person, he said, I've never once saw that. All I see is my single mom that struggled and worked 3 jobs to help me grow up to be the man I am today. And he's in South Afghanistan right now, probably on his 9th deployment. He's won the Bronze Star. He has a master's in business. He's just, I don't know how lucky I got to have a son like that, but everything I do, I constantly think of him. And I thank God how I disappointed him. And he always tells me, you've never disappointed me, even at your worst. So, that's someone, even with the clearance that he has to have for his job, that's someone who has never, ever let go of me. He could have easily disowned me and easily, just gone on his own. He didn't, he doesn't need financial support or anything else from me, but he told me what I've always needed is my mom.
That's great. And what's his first name?
His first name is Andrew.
Andrew, you definitely should be proud of your mom. And is there anything you want to talk to Andrew about? You want to say anything to Andrew? Because I'm sure he'll be listening to this.
I just want to tell him how proud I am and thank you for not giving up on me. And it's always been me and him. We're the double duo. No. And I'm just proud of the man he's become. And I'm grateful for his service to his country. And, I felt like him coming from a single parent home, the The military was something that he had to do to complete his education, but he's made it his own. And he's a very intelligent, strong young man who not only fights for his country, but fights for his mother as well.
That is great. What a freaking happy ending to this story. Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome.
You're an amazing woman, and I know that you're bringing hope and inspiration to others for sure and giving back.
Thank you, Michael.
You got it. Thank you for listening to Positive Connections Radio, in affiliation with Mental Health News Radio. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time, be strong, stand up, speak your truth, and break the stigma.